It's Regina. Welcome back to my haunted library.
It's a
Wrap up. So for the month of June, I read 10 books, which is frankly a lot for me. 2 of them were comics, so I guess that still counts though, right? I think just being on BookTube and keeping track of my books on Goodreads has made me more conscious of what I read, and I'm actually trying to read more, not to like breeze through things, but just to kind of stick to more of a structured reading schedule. The first book I read was an independently published book sent to me by the author for a honest review, and it's called The Erotic Muse by Rajeeve Singh. Okay, so this was a very interesting read. It's, I guess it would be considered erotica. It's about a young man who is very obsessed with sex, and he's kind of porn addicted. Not that that ever happens in life, but you know, he's really kind of caught up in this, and he becomes obsessed with this particular Bollywood actress, and he gets pulled, sort of like Alice into the Looking Glass. He gets pulled into this alternate universe of his own erotic fantasies, and he's kind of confronting these different erotic muses, and he has an arch enemy in this world as well. And it's a very interesting book. I found that the kind of repetitive nature of the sexual scenes, kind of one after another, and very graphically described, which I don't have a problem with. In fact, the writing style, which I'll get to in a sec, it was excellent. It's just really not my thing. I need more of like a purpose and a plot. So I kind of found myself, like the protagonist, sort of stuck in this world and trying to get out a little bit. But that being said, I was so impressed with the author's writing ability. I want to encourage this writer to just keep writing. I mean, he's really good. I'd like to see some other stuff from him. So next up, I read Books of Blood, Volume 4 by Clive Barker. So I'm attempting to read all of Clive Barker's work, starting with the Books of Blood, so I have a long way to go. In one of the stories called The Inhuman Condition, I believe it was the first one in the book, he's working at this theme about this puzzle. And I'm not sure if he wrote Hellbound Heart before or after this came out, but it's the same kind of concept but this, instead of being a box, the Lament configuration puzzle box, it's a string with all these knots. And that was really cool, kind of seeing Clive Barker working a similar theme as you see in, you know, Hellbound Heart or Hellraiser. I also enjoyed seeing these noirish aspects of his work come out in this volume, and then later, I know, I think it's in the last Book of Blood, he gets into the Lord of Illusion story, which I'm really looking forward to reading the book, or the novella, or whatever you want to call it, short story. It's one of my favorite Barker films, and I have never read the story, so I'm really looking forward to that. The next book I read was a comic I bought at BookCon called Wytches. I thought this was great. I really loved the way the writers defined these witches as not your traditional witches, but these creatures that lived inside these portals that through trees, and then you go down into the roots and they're there waiting for you. I liked the artwork. I thought it was really unique. And if you do read it, make sure you read the author's letter to the reader in the back. I found that in a lot of ways more frightening than the actual comic, because it gets into the source of the story and how he came up with this idea. And it was really creepy. So next up was another horror comic that I picked up at BookCon called Regression. This one was not quite as memorable for me as Wytches, but I still really enjoyed it. It's about this character who is dealing with past life regression, and he's kind of getting pulled into this world. And I really enjoyed this. I'd love to keep reading it. So the next book I read is a childhood favorite of mine, the classic Norse Gods and Giants. It's been retitled as The Dueliers, Norse Myths. The Dueliers are a couple from Norway, I believe, who wrote this book and illustrated it beautifully. I did a whole video about this book. It's great. If you're looking for, even as a grown-up, if you're looking for a great entry point into Norse mythology, it's a great place to start. So next on the list was Endless Night by Richard Laymon. This was a horror novel that was a pick for Peter's book club for the month of June. This book and Laymon's other book I read, The Cellar, kind of reminds me of the films that they used to show at the drive-in after midnight when, back in the late 70s, my friends and I would go to the drive-in to watch horror films, and after midnight they'd start showing the really smutty ones. The next on my list was the novelization of the film Alien. Of course, I knew what was going to happen. I'm a huge Alien fan. The book was a little different than the movie, and it was a fun kind of light read. I enjoyed the way the writer handled the material, so I might read another Alien book. The next book I read was a Kindle version of an independent science fiction thriller called The Illumination Query by Sarah Baethge, and I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong, and I apologize. Here's another book with a very unique personal vision, and I thought her idea was great. It's about a zookeeper at Central Park Zoo whose bats escape. He's trying to get the bats, and then this company called Eclipse help him wrangle the bats, and then they hire him to work in the lab, and during this time he starts to discover that there's a lot of creepy stuff happening inside the lab. So it's kind of like a framed story of like the true confessions of this man who's had this experience. I think this is a book that has great potential. I really like the author's ideas, and she has some really vividly described scenes in this book, but I feel like as a whole it kind of lacked that cohesion that would really bring it into a place where a reader can really get into it and enjoy it. And there were some formatting issues as well. It's not easy to do all of this yourself, so I just want to encourage this writer to keep working on it and keep working on her skills. And she's got the imagination, and that's what counts. The next book I read was The Ruins by Scott Smith, and has a little flip back cover. I found this in my record and book exchange a couple weeks ago. I'm so glad I did. It was a great book. It was my favorite book for the month of June. It might be my favorite book for the entire summer. I liked it that much. Highly, highly, highly recommend it for anyone who loves horror with a major sting to it. It's not feel-good horror, but good horror is not feel-good. And last but not least, I finished this this weekend, The Influence by Ramsey Campbell. It's one I found in the same bookstore where I found The Ruins, and it has this great die-cut cover with the creepy kid inside. This book takes the creepy kid subgenre of horror and really makes a classic out of it. This was my second Ramsey Campbell book, but it certainly won't be my last. I really fell in love with his writing style. So that was my reading wrap-up for the month of June. Thanks for stopping in my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye.